Story 1. The Girl Who Wouldn't Let Go. I always thought it was just a bad breakup, until the calls stopped being from Grace herself. I met Grace during my second year of college. She was captivating in a way that made everyone notice, but for me it felt like a private gravity pulling me toward her. Our relationship was intense, obsessive in small ways that I'd once laughed off. Her constant texting, showing up unannounced, reading every word I typed. At the time, it felt sweet, endearing even. I didn't realize it was a warning sign. Things started to change the moment I told her I wanted to break up. I thought it would be clean and simple, a phone call, some awkward silences, and then moving on. But Grace didn't accept simple. She smiled through my words, nodding as if she understood. But there was something cold in her eyes, like she had already mapped out my life without me in it, and she wasn't done yet. The first hint that things were slipping into something darker came a few days later. I was at home reading on my couch when I heard a soft tapping at the window. I froze. It was raining, so the window was closed, and the city street outside was mostly empty. I thought it might be a branch brushing against the glass, but when I looked up, I saw a shadow vanish from the corner of my apartment. My stomach dropped. That was impossible. I lived on the third floor. Then came the calls. At first, just numbers I didn't recognize. Pause, and breathing, with the faintest whisper of my name. Alex, I said, just enough to make my hair stand on end before hanging up. The numbers kept changing. The voice felt calm, patient, waiting. I told myself it was a sick joke, maybe someone pretending to be her, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I started checking the locks on my doors obsessively. Every time I left my apartment, I felt eyes on my back. My friends noticed I'd become jumpy, paranoid even. I shrugged it off, saying it was stress. Deep down, I knew better. Then one night, it escalated. I was walking home from a late shift at work, streets quiet except for the hum of streetlights. I heard footsteps behind me, light, uneven, but deliberate. I turned sharply. No one was there. The sound of my own breath and heartbeat drowned everything else. That's when I felt it. A sudden, icy presence in the air, like someone had slipped into my shadow. I spun around again. Still nothing. I started carrying pepper spray and checking over my shoulder every few seconds. I noticed that sometimes, distant figures would appear at intersections just to vanish the second I looked directly at them. One evening, I even saw her across the street leaning against a lamppost, her face hidden under a hood. Our eyes met and she smiled. That smile wasn't the Grace I'd known. It was something else entirely. Calculating. Hungry. I reported the stalking to the police, but without hard evidence, there was nothing they could do. I started documenting everything. Calls, sightings, notes of her patterns. But the fear didn't leave me. It grew. I began sleeping with the lights on, leaving the TV running all night. And yet, in the darkness, I could almost hear her. Whispering from corners, from the walls themselves. Then came the night of the attack, or what I can only describe as the attack. I had been staying late at a friend's apartment because my own place had started to feel like a trap. Around 2 a.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated but answered. A voice I didn't immediately recognize, male this time, whispered, "She's here." My blood ran cold. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I raced home, heart hammering, doors locked behind me, hoping it was a false alarm. The apartment was empty, or so it seemed. I flicked on the lights and froze. Every drawer in my apartment had been opened. Clothes pulled out. Cabinet saja. On my kitchen table, neatly arranged, were photographs of me. Me at work, me with friends, me alone. And tucked among them, a Polaroid of Grace, her eyes blackened in shadow, standing in the corner of my living room. My apartment. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the brightest corner I could find, every sound making me flinch. And then I heard it, soft footsteps from the bedroom, slow, deliberate. I gripped the baseball bat I'd been carrying for weeks. "Alex," the voice whispered, and it wasn't just Grace anymore. There was a second voice, deeper, rougher, a man's. I couldn't place it, but it chilled me to the bone. They were inside. I crept toward the kitchen, every nerve screaming, and saw a shadow move past the doorway. I froze. It was then I realized something worse. This wasn't just Grace. She had brought someone with her. Someone patient, someone dangerous. They didn't speak. They just watched, waiting for me to make a mistake. I didn't. I grabbed my keys, ran out the back door, and didn't stop until I reached a friend's place across the city. The police came later, but by the time they arrived at my apartment, no one was there. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. Just the lingering scent of perfume I knew was hers, and that same icy presence that refused to leave the room. The photographs had vanished. It was like a bad dream. Except I wasn't asleep, and I still wasn't safe. I moved across town, changed numbers, even switched jobs, hoping distance would be enough. But every so often, late at night, my phone buzzes with an unknown number. And when I answer, I hear that soft whisper, "She's still here." I've never gone back to my apartment. I don't know if Grace ever left, or if she ever intends to. I only know that the feeling of being watched, of someone just outside my field of vision, is something I carry with me now. In the grocery store, in a coffee shop, even in my own bedroom, sometimes I catch a glimpse of someone familiar in a reflection. Someone with dark, hollow eyes and a smile that promises I'll never be free. I don't know what her ultimate plan was or is, but I've learned one thing the hard way. Some people don't just let go, and when someone like Grace decides you belong to them, it doesn't matter how far you run, or how many locks you add, or how many numbers you change. She's patient. She waits, and she's never really gone. The last time I saw her face clearly, at a distance in the corner of a dimly lit street, she didn't run. She didn't hide. She just watched, smiling that same quiet, impossible smile. And I realized with a sinking heart that this isn't over. Not for me, not ever. And sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I swear I can hear her whisper my name, just a breath away. Story 2. He copied my key. I never thought a key could feel like a threat until I found out someone had copied mine. I moved into my small apartment in the city about 6 months after breaking up with Tommy. The relationship had ended quietly, at least on the surface, but Tommy's behavior in the weeks leading up to it had been off. He was possessive, constantly checking my social media, showing up by accident outside my work, and leaving notes on my car windshield. I didn't think much of it at the time. I chalked it up to a difficult breakup, but I should have known that some obsessions don't fade, they just wait. The first few nights in my new place were peaceful, almost blissfully so. I loved the quiet hum of the city outside my window, and the way the evening light hit the walls. But there was one detail I hadn't fully appreciated. The apartment was on the ground floor, and while the locks were new, the door had an old-fashioned latch that could be jiggled with the right tools. I didn't think about it.
I felt safe.
Then, about 3 weeks after moving in, strange things started happening. At first it was subtle. The kitchen drawer where I kept my cutlery was slightly ajar, even though I always made sure it was shut. My favorite mug would be moved a few inches from where I'd left it. I blamed myself, thinking I was just being absent-minded. But one night, I returned from work and noticed my front door latch slightly scratched, tiny grooves that hadn't been there before. My stomach sank. I tried not to panic. I double-checked the locks, installed a chain lock, and even borrowed a small door alarm from a friend. I told myself it was probably just a maintenance worker or a neighbor. That's when Tommy texted me for the first time in months. He was apologetic, claiming he wanted closure, that he just missed me and worried about me. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. I didn't respond. The real terror began a week later. I was asleep when I woke to the faintest sound, a soft click like a lock turning. My heart hammered. I stayed still, straining to hear. A shadow flickered across the living room wall. I froze, too scared to breathe, hoping it was a trick of the streetlights outside. But then I heard it again, a quiet, deliberate shuffle across the hardwood floor. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the bedroom, clutching a kitchen knife, my mind racing through every possible scenario. I kept checking my phone, half expecting someone to call or text me, but there was nothing. In the morning, nothing seemed out of place, except for the small detail of my front door key lying on the floor. Not on the key hook where I always kept it, just there. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but by then I knew the truth. Tommy had copied my key. He had to have. There was no other explanation for someone quietly entering my apartment, moving things around, and leaving without leaving any obvious signs. I called the police. They took a report, gave me advice on upgrading my locks, and promised to increase patrols in the area. I bought new locks, a keypad deadbolt, and even added a motion sensor camera outside the front door. For a while, I felt a fragile sense of security. Then came the phone calls. They started late at night, heavy breathing, almost inaudible at first, then gradually growing louder. Sometimes there were whispers, almost like he was testing the microphone, repeating my name. "Amy!" I jerked the phone away, my hands shaking. The calls would stop as soon as I answered, leaving a static hiss. I changed my number twice and the calls still came. Somehow he found me. Somehow he always knew where I was. The first confrontation happened one Thursday evening. I was cooking dinner, the smell of garlic and onions filling the small kitchen, when I heard a soft tapping at the window. My apartment overlooked a narrow alley. No one should have been there. I glanced outside and froze. Tommy stood there, hands in his pockets, watching me. His expression was calm, almost casual, like he belonged there. I slammed the window shut, my heart racing. He didn't run. He didn't move. And then, as silently as he had appeared, he was gone. I called the police again, but there was no trace. No prints, no footprints, no signs he had climbed down the fire escape. The officers were polite but skeptical. Ground floor apartments can be vulnerable, one said. But there's no evidence anyone actually entered tonight. After that night, I started sleeping in shifts. 1 hour awake, 1 hour asleep, leaving lights on, playing the radio loudly, anything to create noise. I knew it was a losing battle. The unease in my own home was suffocating. Every creak of the floor, every distant footstep outside set my nerves on edge. Then came the most disturbing discovery. I returned home one afternoon to find the kitchen drawer open. Like before, but this time there was a small notebook lying on the counter. I hadn't left it there. Inside, the pages were filled with observations. My routines, what I ate, what I wore, even notes about the hours I left for work. It was meticulous, obsessive, and terrifyingly detailed. It was all Tommy. I didn't touch it. I snapped a picture and sent it to the police. Their response was slow, almost indifferent. I moved out that weekend. A friend let me stay with her while I found a new apartment. Higher floor, more security, and no easy access. The night I packed my things, I felt eyes on me. I knew he was watching, maybe from the alley, maybe from some hidden corner. I didn't look. I just left. It's been 6 months since I moved. I've changed my locks, my number, and my routines. I even installed a home security system with cameras inside and out. And yet sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel it. The slow, almost imperceptible weight of being observed. My new locks click and I flinch. A shadow passes my window and my chest tightens. I've even started double-checking the door, locking it twice, 3 times. I can't stop. A week ago, I came home from work to find a key taped under my doormat. My first thought was disbelief. My second thought was panic. I haven't touched it. I haven't reported it. I just stare at it, knowing that the person who once loved me enough to stalk me still knows me well enough to leave a silent message. I can be anywhere you are. Some nights, I lie awake, listening to the hum of the city and imagine him outside, pacing, waiting. My apartment feels smaller, my windows feel like eyes, my doors like invitations. I don't know how he got that key, and I don't know if he's ever going to stop. But I do know one thing. A copied key isn't just metal and teeth, it's a promise. And Tommy is keeping his. Even now I hear faint scratching at the door. I tell myself it's the wind, the pipes, my imagination. But deep down I know better. The key isn't just under the doormat anymore. It's inside me, in the creeping dread that never leaves. And maybe, just maybe, it's already inside your mind too, making you wonder how safe your own doors really are. I don't know when or if it will end. And somehow that's the worst part. Story 3. The letters never stopped. I never thought someone could know me so well and yet still terrify me. It started innocuously. A letter slipped under my apartment door one rainy evening. I barely recognized the handwriting, all delicate loops and careful slants, until I saw the name at the bottom. Marissa. My stomach sank. We had broken up 6 months earlier, and I thought that chapter closed. But the envelope contained more than just words. It had a photograph of my front door, taken that very day, from somewhere across the street. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coincidence, a prank from some anonymous sender. But then the letters kept coming, always with little details that suggested she was watching me. My lunch order scribbled in the corner, the exact time I left for work, even the book I had just started reading. There were drawings too, crude sketches of my apartment layout, with one room shaded ominously. Each letter smelled faintly of her perfume, floral and cloying, the scent lingering long after I touched the paper. I stopped answering them, hoping the messages would cease. They didn't. One morning, I found a stack of Polaroids slipped between my car windshield wipers. The first few showed empty streets and lampposts, but as I flipped through them, I recognized myself in the distance, leaving my apartment, buying coffee, jogging along the river trail. The images were grainy, yet unmistakable. Every photograph felt like a page from a surveillance log of my own life. Sleep became a stranger. I would wake to the faint creak of floorboards outside my bedroom, convinced someone had slipped inside. I installed a security camera in the hallway. The footage was unnerving. Each morning, the camera captured a shadow lingering near my door, dissolving whenever I stepped out to check. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints on the rain-slicked pavement, nothing tangible to show the police. Just me and Marissa's letters, which now arrived daily. One evening, I found a note on my kitchen counter, written on a scrap of paper ripped from a notebook I hadn't seen in years. It read simply, "You can't hide from me. I know every corner of your mind." The words were unsettling not because they threatened my life, but because they seemed intimately true. She knew my routines, my thoughts, my smallest habits. I felt exposed in ways I hadn't imagined possible. The tension escalated when I started noticing small objects moved around my apartment. A mug that had been on the counter appeared on the windowsill. My keys were no longer in the bowl by the door, but hanging from a hook I didn't have. At night, I began hearing whispers that made my hair stand on end. I could never tell if it was the wind, my imagination, or her voice, low and deliberate, murmuring my name just outside my bedroom door. I decided to confront it directly. I called the number she still texted from and for the first time spoke to her. Marissa's voice was soft, almost cheerful. "I just wanted you to see me," she said. "I like knowing you're safe, and that I'm always close." The words sounded casual, but the weight behind them was suffocating. I hung up and changed my locks, thinking that would end it. It didn't. The letters continued, now more insistent, more precise. One arrived with a tiny scrap of fabric from a coat I had worn that morning. I reported it to the police, showed them the photographs, letters, and videos, but there wasn't enough evidence for charges. "It's frustrating," the detective said, "but unless we catch her in the act." I didn't need to hear the rest. I understood perfectly. Someone could invade your life silently, and you'd be powerless to stop it. Months passed, and I moved to a new apartment across town, hoping distance would break the pattern. For a brief period, I felt relief, like sunlight after a long storm. Then on a quiet Thursday morning, a letter arrived in my mailbox. I tore it open, bracing for the familiar dread. The handwriting was different, more careful, almost printed. Inside was a single Polaroid, my new apartment building. In the image, a shadow lingered at the top of the stairs, watching the mailboxes. On the back, in familiar looping letters, Marissa had written, "I see you, always." I threw the photograph in the trash and tried to sleep, but the unease stayed with me. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear a faint knock on the door. I don't look through the peephole anymore. I can't. I've learned that some people don't need to touch you to control your world, to make your own home feel like a cage. And the letters? They never stopped.